Good morning again, or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. My name is Julia Klein. I'm ivoflow's marketing manager, and I'm here to welcome you to today's webinar, Data Speaks Louder Than Words, How to Turn Procurement into a Value Driver. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. Before we start, just a quick note from my side. The session will be recorded and chat with you afterwards. And during the webinar, feel free to submit your questions anytime via the Q&A panel. We'll make sure to cover as many questions as possible. And for those of the questions that we can't cover today, we're happy to reach out after the session via email. Okay, with that, let's dive right in. I'm handing it over to our first speaker, Nick. Enjoy the webinar.
Thanks, Julia, for the introduction, and also warm welcome from my side to everybody joining our webinar, Data Speaks Louder Than Words today. Before we dive in, a quick look at our agenda for today. We will obviously do a quick introduction about ivoflow and the two speakers we have for the webinar today. And then I'm more than happy to hand over to my guest speaker, Andreas, which will walk us through decoding profitability and compare the COGS and the EBIT walk perspective here. And we will dive in a little bit what helps the companies more to drive profitability. Obviously, material cost, procurement spend is always a big driver. So I will then, following Andreas, deep dive into the impact of spend analytics, including a live demo where we show a couple of examples how we, with ivoflow, help companies drive cost downs, improve margins and profitability. And I think the last 10 to 15 minutes we will spare for a Q&A. And like Julia said, please submit all your questions through the chat. Just a few words about ivoflow. Obviously, we are a spend analytics platform which is focusing on manufacturing enterprises. So all the organizations out there which have quite a big bomb to sales ratio, often 50, 60, 70%, put a large spend on the street and have lower profit margins. That's obviously our sweet spot. That's where we come in and not only help visualizing procurement and spend data, but also pinpointing on new cost down ideas, which the procurement organizations can then execute to support the bottom line in the end of the day. ivoflow is a quite young company, 5 years on the market, pretty successful, working with a lot of large manufacturing enterprises as of today. And happy to walk you through a little bit more details what we do later on in the product demo. Myself, I'm Nicholas Neubauer. I'm one of the co-founders and managing directors at ivoflow. By heart, I'm a procurement practitioner. I spent about 10 years also in the industry, on the negotiation table, made my hands dirty. And I'm super happy that I have Andreas with me today. And within that, Andreas, please feel free to introduce yourself and walk us through your part.
Thank you, Nick, for having me today. Good morning to everyone. And it's really an honor for me to be on the ivoflow premises. You see the background ivoflow name. And for everyone who maybe doesn't know, I'm supporting really ivoflow since some time as I really look to the data analytics tool from them as a tool I would have loved to have during my 30 years of career. And some words to myself. I'm now 58 years old. Have now 30 years of experience in the automotive industry. I started in the 90s, a long time ago, with GM globally in purchasing and procurement. Spent there most of my career, I have to say, with different responsibilities in direct and indirect purchasing, with a lot of many billion-dollar spends globally, regional, as also then joint ventures with Fiat, mergers, and make or buy assessments as well, and also taking part in the merger with PSA, today's Stellantis. And after the lovely 25 years in the automotive spot as OEM at OEMs, I changed to ZF for roughly close to 4 years. And the last 2 years, I'm I would say, an independent, doing what I like to do, like today, a webinar with Nick and you guys, and supporting startups and freelance a little bit to stay in contact. But again, just bringing my experience into hopefully also some new and modern digital tools and KPI initiatives where I strongly believe they are needed in the coming time to streamline, to efficiently organize procurement and other functions as well. With this, let's go to the next chart, Nick. The title we're saying is Decoding Profitability. As said, I have a lot of experience in cross-functional work as well, not just only in procurement. I also was part of profitability reports, profitability programs to improve it, where you always need to look cross-functional and where you have to highlight the importance of purchasing and procurement in this process, as material cost, at least in industry companies and at least in the automotive one, are 50 to 70% of your total revenue. So what it means is really give it the importance it has, and that is exactly what I want to demonstrate with this chart, the complexity chain. I would say the automotive business is one of the most complex businesses you can be in. And it's important, and therefore I like this chart. When we look from the left to the right, you have nearly in every product, not just automotive, a design phase where you engineer, where you have your purchasing efficiency, where you buy the parts with the suppliers, where you spend your ED&D internally as also externally, where you define how much CapEx you spend, and where you also finally release and validate your product before it goes into the start of production and the manufacturing, where you have then to receive the supplier parts with all the management and logistic behind, where you have your manufacturing costs and also your overhead costs in manufacturing. As I said, the inbound logistics plays an important role in a global environment as well. And then you have your in-house logistics as well, how you organize your warehousing, where you have sales and supply and line sequence as an example, and so on. And then, of course, you have the marketing and sales area where this pricing process starts. How much do I price my products? Which customer? What market? What product offers? I open in different markets. NSC stands for National Sales Companies. The stock management, how much I put in. Maybe a lot knows that in the US you have more cars on stock, what customers buy there than in Europe, where you have more customer ordered a car, and then you have maybe less stock management. You have your dealer, the point of service efficiency, and the dealer stock management there. And you have your after sales later on, during serious life as also after sales life for at least 15 years. So this is a very complex chain, as you see then there in the bottom, and you see all the chain elements are connected. And what is important to understand is that design and manufacturing is more the cost side, and the marketing sales is of course the revenue side. And we all know revenue minus the cost is at the end where your profit lies. So you have to maximize your revenue, you have to minimize your cost side to increase your profit. And if you give on a chain, like it is here mentioned, a shock or a push on the right side, it also will end a reaction on the left side. If you push it in the middle, you have reactions to both sides. So there is no independency of one function, of one step in this process and from the others. Therefore, you have to see it holistically. You have to see it from a complete company perspective when you go into target setting, budgeting, when you look into who can deliver how much in performance, how you organize KPIs. If you do it in silos, you will never come to a nearly best result. What you anyhow most likely will not achieve, even with all best transparency and planning of data. And that is, I think, why I'm saying data is the key. You only convince different functions in this chain with data, not with words, not with good arguments only, when you have no data and the data you need for actions. And that is an example by purpose I put on the bottom. You maybe see there is the manufacturing of an Opel add-in. This gives me a little bit, as an example, a good side how this all belongs together. The good side of the Opel Adam was they put it on the Corsa platform. They just cut 20 centimeters off the floor in the rear after the front seats. And with this, you had a common base with the Corsa. You could scale up because Corsa was with 400,000 units, partly even a joint venture with the Fiat Punto, up to 800,000 units. So to add 100, 150,000 on it, you could build on the scale of the platform with the powertrains, with the transmissions, with the axles, the whole chassis and powertrain. And they put another body on it. And this was the question then from sales and marketing on the other side. Hey, what is my unique selling point for this car? My competition is a BMW Mini. It is a Fiat 500. They all have heritage. I don't have heritage as an Opel Adam, so I need to have something unique. The unique was that every customer could order the car in a way as he wanted to have it. So if you wanted to have a star in a roof, you could have a star in a roof, like also a cabriolet roof, like also a glass roof, different colors on wheels, interior, exterior, heated steering wheel, yes, no. So the complexity of this car was the highest complexity I personally ever saw in my experience, my 30 years. So bottom line, everything what you did right to go on the platform, efficient, high volumes, you more or less destroyed on the sales side with this complexity because it was simply too much. And if you have to have all these parts with low volumes, you have to tool them up, you have to schedule them, you have to bring them to the plant, you have to put them beside the line, you have to manage this all. And this was a mess in the plant in Eisenach, I have to say, to organize. So bottom line, you see one side and the goals and what you support there, what effect it has on the other side, across the different channels, and the cost side was heavily affected. And later on, you take complexity out to save costs, but the money is spent and customers are not happy because suddenly they cannot order a Starlight roof anymore when they want to order the second Adam because it was taken out of the offer management. Just an example how this comes together, and hopefully everyone can follow a little bit at least. Next chart, Nick. So I'm going to through ideas how you can come to profit and what are the different levels and how you maybe can also organize KPIs and targets in a good way. The EBIT walk is maybe a standard tool, I would say, where you come from the upper left side, the revenue, into net revenue, net sales, when you take the sales incentives out, because the list price is a list price, but you all know that, and I hope no one from you guys maybe ever bought a car for a list price. You always get certain rebates. So these are the sales incentives on different markets. If you're in the leasing business, in the rental business, private customers, fleet business, there are different conditions depending also on volumes and relationships and markets. So the list price, the offer strategy, the free flow option, FFO, take up means all your extras you can order, the sales channels, as I mentioned, and the powertrain trim mix of cars. This is complexity handled by sales and marketing, affecting the revenue. And with these tools, they can play to optimize the revenue. So the sales intent is up, you come to the net sales, and now the cost side starts. And it starts, of course, then also with what are the technical solutions I'm offering here? The technical cost reduction as well. How do I improve my technical content? The right contenting, what content I put in brings value I can price for. So discussion with sales, very important. And how much does it cost? The commercial cost performance, what every buyer knows, of course, heavily, how to optimize and pay the best price for the value you get for the parts. And I'm not saying cheap cost or cheap buying. It's really paying the right price, the best price for the value you get. And then quality improvements in one or the other area, and the logistic planning. These are all cost areas which then will go up, will lead to the contribution margin. this also then is a make versus buy. What do I make in-house? What do I buy? How many plants I have? Do I produce a car in 1 plant, in 2 plants, in 3 plants? So the footprint. The footprint as well, where I have my suppliers, of course, is important for the logistic costs as well. My manufacturing efficiency in the plant. How much headcount do I have? How much invests in optimization I have? And then, of course, the capacity, the volume I tooled up for. These are all cost elements, mainly in the manufacturing side. This is a very political area from my perspective. Make versus buy, you always have discussions with Works Council as well, who wants to have it all in-house. Purchasing maybe wants to more buy it from outside. One example, I always try to explain it a little bit with examples as well, is that I was responsible for make or buy instead of manufacturing because I could provide real data from purchasing via our systems. Manufacturing and Works Council always played with data or not full cost and also to keep it in-house. That's also a good example as well, where data drives decisions and where we highlighted this up to the CFO when we had certain disputes. But a clear process, clear data helps a lot to also take emotions and political issues out. Because at the end also a Works Council normally supports profit. And if you come to this minus the contribution minus the variable manufacturing cost, we come to the variable profit, where you then have only left, I would say, all the fixed costs, the non-manufacturing structural costs, the marketing, communication spends, all these overhead, what you maybe can also not put directly into one product to come to the EBIT. My experience with this EBIT walk is it is not supporting as needed the cross-functional collaboration and the profit optimization, because very often it is more a silo thinking. Everyone concentrates on his focus here of activities on levers, but maybe it will not come to the best profit at the end, because if you sub-optimize all this, does not mean that the total is optimized. And it needs very strong governance. It needs definitely very strong support from the leadership from the top, that everyone understands it, and that the KPIs are all set. But it's not automatically coming together, like maybe another example I'm coming in a minute to it, where it at least partly comes together on its own when you peer people and when you peer KPIs and give them all the same KPI. I mean, of course, everyone has a profit in the leadership as a KPI, but the targets below needs to be definitely very well aligned, and you need an escalation process in cases you have conflicts. And conflicts you quite often have between logistics and maybe also purchasing. One example I can really also share here. It was just in euro to pay more on a part to save 1.5 euros on logistic costs. But of course, logistics wanted to have it, and purchasing said, I'm buying too expensive for the company. It was the right thing to do, but everyone had his targets and not working together for the best for the company, and it need escalation. If you both give them the same KPIs and the target, you need no escalation. You take noise out of the system and it comes on its own, and you can empower people on lower levels instead of rising everything to higher levels or even to the board level. So bottom line, good. I think everyone should know these levels, everyone should do it, but it's for me not the optimal. In one of the OEMs I worked with, we came to, I think, a better solution. Coming to the next one. Next chart, Nick. And this is the concept of cost of goods sold. If we look to the left side, you still see this gray bar. It is the sales, so the revenue side. So no change there. Then you see this brown greenish color, the cost of goods sold. The SG&A and the R&D. R&D, research and development, SG&A, all the sales in general costs, the headcount, the overhead. So they all are cost levels. So the R&D and the SG&A, we don't look into when you look to the cost of goods sold in the details, but of course they are parts of the cost itself. And when we look to the cost of goods sold, it is mainly purchasing, means material costs in the upper right corner. It is the manufacturing costs, the inbound logistic costs. Then everything what needs to be amortized, mainly the tooling and investment. And then you see a red bar, that's more the production cost variance. You always have certain things you cannot plan. A strike somewhere, you have to fly parts instead of getting them by truck. The Suez Canal issue some years ago, when you have containers on this ship and you fly them as parts from China because you don't need them now and not in 2 weeks. So bottom line, these are costs you cannot plan for, but they are there and they are part of your production cost, the total landed cost. Therefore, you cannot ignore them. And then you have commercial costs. The outbound logistics is a big portion, but also here you sometimes have unplanned costs, what is mentioned here with variable commercial means, where you have something special to get the cars and the products to your markets and to your dealers as well there in time. Or you have extra shifts you have to work. They should be normally in the manufacturing cost as well, production cost variance. So that depends a little bit where you count them as well, but unplanned costs are the two I mentioned here as well. And one example I want to give is when we introduced this, I even didn't know it in purchasing because no one told me. I got a call from a plant manager who said, Andreas, what are the material costs for my car I'm producing in the plant? And I said, well, so far you never were interested in the material cost. You had your manufacturing cost, you had your planning, your quality, how many cars per shift you had to get out of your plant. Since when are you interested in material cost? I asked him. He said, well, I'm now interested in because the management, the leadership makes me responsible for the cost of the complete car leaving my plant, including material cost. So I gave him the material cost. Thanks to good data in purchasing, I had at least for cars which are only in one plant, the good costs. It's difficult when you have several cars in one plant, how to maybe divide them sometimes, but I could give him the information. And 2 hours later, the CFO and the manufacturing leadership called me and said, well, Andreas, you have a new target. And they gave me the same target like the manufacturing guy had. Means we both had a cost of goods sold target where I had my material cost still, so many percent reduction they want to expect. But I also had in my KPIs now the target for manufacturing costs as well, and the logistics inside as well, in and out. And with this, you married logistics, purchasing, manufacturing, the main drivers of cost in an organization with one common goal. And suddenly, it was not an issue anymore that I saved logistic cost, but I had to spend more on material cost. It was not an issue anymore that the plant was keeping something in its plant because it was more efficient than to buy it from a SILT center, supply and line sequence center, or from a pre-assembly center in front of the plant, where he maybe before pushed it out because it was reducing his headcount and his cost. And it was another bucket. So this is what I want to say is the most important cost view, and how you marry different functions that they all heading in the right direction automatically, and when you give them shared cost KPIs instead of directing and making it up on a high level and saying everyone what he has to perform, and later on everyone is doing it and you have more fights cross-functional instead of alignment. Okay, next chart. Very short, what can be a difference? And coming to my last 5 minutes here. One OEM is using COGS, the other OEM is using the normal edit walk. You have the same categories. The numbers are a little bit fake. They are, of course, not real. I will not share real numbers, even when it's some years ago. But they are directionally the same, and the end result of difference of 6% was also nearly there. So bottom line, if you follow the COGS, we saw less material cost, we saw less inbound logistic costs, and we saw less D&A, means depreciation and amortization. And this was the main driver overall in this difference. A part of it, of course, is complexity. As I said, this one OEM had maybe more complexity than the others. One tried really to catch the last customer in a small market, where the other OEM is saying 80% of the customers are good. But just that you have an understanding as well, in automotive. If you maybe want to have 80% of the customers in a segment, you maybe have just 50% complexity compared to someone who wants to get 100% of the customers, offering everything he can offer in the different markets. And with this, then spending really a lot in not on the sales side only, but really on the part side and the manufacturing side as well. So another item what also was interesting to see, you see it, D&A is just double on one OEM on the EBIT walk. This is just a percent, but it is 100% more when you look to the number. Why is it? In the cost of goods sold model, you have the depreciation and amortization really as a big portion as well, what are costs. So if you always invest new from model to model, you have always to depreciate new from the beginning. If you have older equipment, what is still functioning, maybe the second generation or so, it's maybe already depreciated. You don't have it as costs in your calculations. And with this, of course, it makes a difference. Here in this case, 1%, but it is huge when you can look to the absolute number, 1 to 2% here. So bottom line, 6% difference is the difference, or was in this case, the difference between making money and not making money, making profit or being equal, or maybe even make a loss. And you can only compare this, of course, when you have takeovers, if you have merger and acquisition processes, where you have this data available, what normally is not available. Of course, a lot you can also look to balance sheets and find out. So with this last chart, everyone has his levers with cost and things. As I said, cost of goods sold, every function has them. Material cost has a big portion. You see it there highlighted with the red circle. And you all, as buyers at least, know the toolboxes, right? We have FX rates, we have raw materials changing, we have economies of scale, we have the amortization of the fixed cost, run-out parts, new parts coming in. Everywhere, let me say, changes in the environment, also sustainability costs now coming in, political uncertainties, all the crises the last 4 or 5 years, Corona and so on, showed you what can all happen. And transparency is king. You need to know where your parts are going in. And I give you an example from my last assignment. It's really essential that you understand when you are, in this case, delivering brake systems or steering systems, that you know where in the chip crisis, where the chips are coming from, in what parts and electronic parts they are going, where these electronic parts are going into a brake, what customer is behind. And with this, you need a commodity management system, a transparency, what is immense important in these times of where you have to react fast. Single sourcing in the past, maybe today it's more dual sourcing where you have to go into, you have to invest strategically in the right tools. And that is a little bit my aim here as well today, right? And I'm supporting startups where I think they have a value and a benefit for companies, and would have loved to have them during my active times in these companies I mentioned. And the toolbox and the system from ivoflow is one of them, where I really think a lot of companies today can really profit from when they have something like this in place. And so therefore, I'm happy to also with this webinar promote this a little bit. And Nick, if there are no other items at the moment from your side, I would say I hand it over to you that you go through your toolbox.
Thank you very, very much, Andreas, first of all, for your support and the kind words, but also to explain this big topic. I mean, the last 30 minutes, we really dived into how you can financially structure an entire manufacturing organization. So my part is now zooming in again on the 60 to 70%. I'm jumping back here for a second on the previous slide. The material cost 67%, 70%. I already said it in my introduction. Material cost is typically a very, very big driver, and that's exactly where ivoflow comes into place by not only generating transparency through all the spend data, supplier data, commodity data, but also within our toolbox to show new ideas, like I said initially, to the buyers on how to reduce cost. Yeah, and I think Andreas did a great job explaining everything from the commercial perspective, from the design to the after sales. And what does it mean? We have a project life cycle, right? So if we look on whatever product, if it's a car, if it's a white good washing machine, if it's any kind of product for the consumer industry, most of the products have a life cycle. They are sourced in a certain point of time, and then they are produced for many, many years. And exactly that's where we are coming in with ivoflow, with our spend analytics solution. And that's where I want to now deep dive into a couple of examples. To set a little bit the scene, to provide a little bit context on ivoflow as a platform, how it operates. In the first step, everything starts with integrating data. In our world, that does not only mean the internal procurement and finance data and cost engineering data the companies produce, generate, and have in their systems, but also, and Andreas mentioned it before, everything which is dynamic on the market over this 5-7 years product life cycle. We have seen huge dynamic and huge peaks also during COVID on material cost, on energy cost. Labor rates typically go up over time. We have significant fluctuations within exchange rates, within freight rates, and that's the second part of the data, the external world we capture with ivoflow. In the second step, we provide our clients with transparency across all their procurement, spend, and supplier data. Andreas, also, you said it, sometimes it's forgotten how relevant this is, but then if a crisis hits in and you need to react quickly and you need to have good quality, trustworthy data on hand quickly, this topic becomes again more relevant. But what we at ivoflow are always thinking about is not only to draw nice and shiny pictures and generate nice and shiny dashboards from the data, but also to provide the purchasing community with insights. If you look at the buyer in a purchasing organization, they typically manage hundreds of suppliers, thousands of part numbers. They are responsible for plants across the globe, for suppliers across the globe. So there's a huge complexity, and we want to basically challenge all the procurement decisions, all the data every day to unlock new ideas for cost savings, which you can then later on execute within our platform. So you have a P&L effective cost saving at the end of the day. And we are building a good friendship with the CFO of our companies, right? And to the point 3, what do we do here? We basically digitized the tools the buyers are using today and also the last decades to data-driven analyze their spend, their parts, in order to identify new cost down opportunities, to understand. Sorry, Andreas, I put your name in here again. You said not the cheapest price, but the best price I can achieve, and also maybe a fair price. And again, during all those market fluctuations, companies often lost track in the past. What's now a fair price? What's a realistic price? I had 2 times price reductions. Then my supplier asked me for a price increase. Now I got a small rebate back. But is the pricing at the minute fair? Is it according to the market conditions or not? So that's a couple of things we are considering within our platform. And today we want to jump quickly in a live demo because of the limitation of time. We want to show 3 examples today. The first one is around material, but also labor and energy developments on the market, how they impact part prices, and maybe open a negotiation case for clawbacks or for piece price adjustment. The second example is manufacturing part number, which is quite relevant in electronics, where OEMs, but also tiers, utilize different part numbers across their BOMs globally. So it's very hard to compare physically the same parts pricing wise, especially from a landed cost perspective, considering freights and duties. And then the third example is a linear pricing model, which is obviously a good tool for commodity parts, seals, injection molded parts, fasteners, where you typically have a lot of part numbers. And you need to understand, are my prices in line, or do I have any kind of outliers I can address? So that are the 3 examples today. I will walk you through now. Again, will be a short and quick demo. Obviously, with the hope we generate a little bit of appetite to have an offline conversation and to make a deep dive into the individual tools, also the ones we are not able to show today. Okay, having this said, I'm jumping in a live demo environment. We are looking at we said we wanted to have about 15 to 10 minutes left at the end of the meeting to answer any questions which were coming in through the chat actually. But before we do that, maybe a quick summary from my end, and Andreas also please feel free to jump in. Cross-functional alignment is key. I think you have demonstrated quite nicely how different KPI methodologies, either in silos or more cross-functional, can really make a big impact to profitability. So make sure shared KPIs are in place and cross-functional alignment. I think it's not a new learning to most of our participants today, but yes, material cost, BOM cost are still the biggest lever in order to drive quick wins and to maximize profitability. I showed 3 out of 10 examples today. What we want to come across here, all levers matter, right? We often see that companies say, this year we put an initiative on the street to investigate material cost. And then in the next year, we look what linear progression pricing can bring to the table. I think all levers matter. Some are stronger, some are weaker in certain commodities. So you need to have a very holistic approach. And then the last point, spend analytics is often put into a box like, okay, there are companies out there which pull my data and show me my spend developments by supplier, by country, by plant, by car line, by product family, whatsoever. Yes, we do this as well. But I think the interesting part comes in when you not only draw the pictures, but go a couple of steps deeper and bring new insights to the table, which translate into savings. Andreas, anything to add from your side?
Well, enough said, I think, but our title is how to turn procurement into a value driver, right? And my observation is still that too many companies are more in this operational modus to get the parts in time to the plant where it's needed, and are not working this spend strategically with also modern tools on the market. Let me say it this way. Maybe sometimes still in an old way. As I mentioned maybe before already, I didn't mention, but I was responsible for wiring harnesses globally sometime, and I used LPP already 15 years ago, right? But I didn't use it in a context like you have it in your system. So this reminded me now that was a separate one. You had a lot of effort with all the data there to import somehow in an Excel, whatever environment to get some lab. This was then, if you wanted to do something like this in preparation for a negotiation with the suppliers, this was days of work, let's say it this way, if not weeks. Today you get it in a modern environment from a digital tool, very fast if you set it up in the right way. And we are in a fast changing environment. You need these tools to really apply a strategic purchasing and procurement in context of an overall company perspective to really drive values from a material cost perspective. And therefore I can only encourage everyone to really look to digital tools, to look to many startups on the market, including of course ivoflow, what we have seen here. You also work with, I think, some other startups together with data management and so on, and it's important that we really get our arms around to make a holistic approach and to give purchasing the same value and standard on the board like other functions like finance, manufacturing, engineering, and that we give them as well the empowerment to drive the actions with these tools here and to use them, because only if you empower people, you can also hold them accountable for the results. I have to say, I have my experiences that too often you give targets out to functions, you hold them accountable, but you don't give them the empowerment and the tools to deliver. And this needs to go hand in hand. that you really get the most out of it from a procurement perspective. Therefore, appreciate again that you invited me today, that I can continue to support you guys, because I think every company who has not something similar in place should really do a proof of concept to look if it is something what they can use strategically or not. You can not lose anything. You can just win. That's my speech to all the industry companies outside.
Thanks, Andreas.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you, Nick, for providing a short demo with the insights and best practice examples, and also thank you to Andreas for sharing your real world examples from 30 years in the industry. We've received some questions and we still have roughly 10 minutes left, so let's jump into the Q&A session. The first question is, I think, best for you to answer, Nick. I have multiple ERPs in place. How do you ensure all data is taken into account?
Good question. That's actually our daily business. Why is this? Because the manufacturing industry is pursuing a lot of mergers and acquisitions. New companies are formed, companies spin off organizations. I think that's happening all the time and everywhere. So we are used to work in environments where not only one ERP is in place. That's lovely, but that's not realistic. So what we do, and maybe also a nice question for follow-up, we build a client-specific environment where we implement a middleware, which is then fetching the data across either different ERPs or if ERPs and business warehouses to bring all the procurement data together in one database, and obviously also are aligned. What we have learned when you have different ERPs is not only that you have different systems, but you have different kind of commodity structures and architectures and hierarchies in maybe different sites, or you have your vendors not fully mapped to a certain parent level that you can look on the supplier holistically across all ERPs and plans. So that's the homework which is also done by our side, by our engineers. But yes, it's our daily business.
Thank you very much. The next one, maybe you would take this as well, Nick. How does the tool identify the cost structure of an article?
That's another good question. How to answer? There are multiple different ways, and this depends a little bit on the majority of the organizations. First of all, for most common commoditized components, we can bring high-level structures in place. The second thing is, if you are working in a more mature company, often you have a cost engineering department. So there are tools out there where we can also fetch data from the typical cost engineering tools on the part number level. So we get the internal calculation to bring these cost structures in. And the third way is through supplier cost breakdowns. But this also depends a little bit on the industry and if it's a common practice, right? So within our automotive clients, cost breakdowns are typically the standard approach. But if we look into our clients from the consumer goods industry, for example, that's not an industry where cost breakdowns are so heavily used today. Yeah? But for these companies, I think then the value comes from the experience we have besides our software and our technology, but the experience we have in our organization to build this model on a higher scale across really commodities. Yeah? And then I think it's a question if you want to have 100% accuracy on your 10% A components, or if you want to understand really how the dynamics of the market impact all your A, B, C, D category parts. Yeah? But also here, good question to take this offline, because we could discuss another hour about this or do another webinar about this.
I hear a little bit, Nick, let me step in, that maybe sometimes companies are afraid to share their data because they are maybe not complete, or maybe a cost breakdown is outdated or whatever. No one is perfect, right? I mean, I can only say, let's get started. Let's start 80-20 rule. Is your 20% of parts who are 80% of your value, get them fixed and get them up to date, and then get the benefits from a digital tool like the ivoflow tool. So not wait until you have perfect data. You never have perfect data. I mean, we have to be also honest to ourselves. You can, of course, aim for it, but you need to get started to have all this actual data in place.
Thank you. There's another question that refers, I guess, to your part, Andreas, about profit improvement. Is it possible to adapt these profit improvement approaches for other industries?
For other industries, I would say yes. I mean, I tried in my presentation not always only to say automotive and maybe also talk about product instead of cars. I think everyone who is has a manufacturing and the sales side as well, engineering, as I said, these buckets can at least go also for this profit walk concept and should have it in place, but also can marry his supply chain, his manufacturing and purchasing in the cost of goods sold concept. So industry, I would say yes. Of course, it becomes a little bit different when you are maybe not applicable so far when it comes to services and others. But industry, I would say, why not? I mean, the bike industry, I'm in discussions with one of the German bike manufacturers from time to time, and they of course can also use it. It is they can learn a lot from automotive, I think. Specifically, it's also the e-bike industry is now. I'm not saying in the crisis, but at least the markets are somehow on a level stable. But everything where you have production, I would say, when you're selling something and you are involved in development, you can use it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. The next question is more ivoflow related. So Nick, this one's for you again. What data sources are the basis for the levers working in the tool?
Yeah, I think I explained it a little bit during the presentation. In the end of the day, it's two buckets, or we say it's two buckets. It's the company's internal data, which is mainly the data which is sitting in the ERP system. I think that's 90% of the data, the internal data we need to operate our tool is in the ERP system. Then there are a couple of data points which often are maybe managed and tracked in the supply relationship management system, so in the SRM. Yeah, and then also what I said previously on the cost models, depending on the maturity and if companies are using cost engineering as an example, that's also a valuable asset. Yeah, but basically 95% ERP system, a little bit add-on from SRM sometimes, and then if available, the cost engineering data, but that's not a must. And then the second part is obviously the external view, but this is where our clients do not really need to worry about because we bring this. We have live RPs to companies providing us with live duty and import rates and freight rates. We have 29,000 exchange rate pairs which are updated every day. We have access to labor, energy, and material costs across all the manufacturing countries in North, South America, Asia, Europe, for almost every category. So I think that's a portion we take care of, as well as getting the right internal data from the clients.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much.
Answer is ERP is typically enough to get started.
All right. We still have 3 minutes to go now, so I think there's room for one last question. This one's popped up quite often, I guess. Nick, also for you to answer. Is it possible to kind of test the software before using it?
Yes, obviously not at the full scale, like we would talk about an entire deployment and onboarding and fine-tuning. But we could test it based on reports, exports are generated from the ERP system as an example, but without the work of building the actual RPs to the system. Yeah? Because in the live production, everything runs automatically through RPs. We can define how often we want to take the data, but for a testing period, we can do a one-time upload for certain categories, build all the dashboards, build the spend cube, but then also start the, let's call it cost down engine, and see what opportunities are still out there, which also helps later on to define a business case. Yeah. And maybe one last comment somehow fits to the question. why we still find opportunities is not because of the people in the organizations are not able to do their job, but I think Andreas said it, it's getting more and more complex. Internal data, external data are changing much faster. So there's a lot of more data I need to consume, I need to understand, I need to analyze, I need to bring together, I need to make the right conclusions from it. So I think that brings the human to its limitations and maybe the Excel spreadsheets. So that's, I think, where tech enables.
All right, perfect. So I think we're perfectly on time now. So let's wrap things up. Huge thank you again to the speakers, to Nick and Andreas for sharing the insights. And to all of you, of course, thank you as well for joining us today and engaging in this discussion, submitting your questions. We hope you're leaving with some valuable insights for your own procurement organizations. And yeah, thank you again. Enjoy the rest of the day and hopefully see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all. Bye.
Bye-bye.